everyone. Welcome to an afternoon with Vikas Swarup, here to talk about his latest book, The Accidental Apprentice, and about the journey of writing since his famous debut novel. I also hope he will tell us a bit more about why he's mentioned Google in his acknowledgements in both his books. Also, as a way of introduction, I'm just going to speak a little bit more about him. So Vikas Swarup is an Indian novelist and diplomat who has served in Turkey, the United States, Ethiopia, the United Kingdom, South Africa, and Japan, best known for his novels Q&A and Six Suspect. He was born in Allahabad, in Uttar Pradesh, in a family of lawyers and pursued his education in Allahabad itself. Vikas then joined the Indian Foreign Services in 1986. He is currently, since 2009, posted in Japan as India's Consul General to Osaka, Kobe. His debut novel, Q&A, has been translated into 42 languages and was shortlisted for the best first book by the Commonwealth Writers' Prize and won South Africa's exclusive Books Bouquet Prize in 2006, as well as the Prix Grand Public at the 2007 Paris Book Fair. It was voted winner of the Best Travel Read Fiction at the Heathrow Travel Product Award in 2009. The movie Slumdog Millionaire, as you all know, went on to win 8 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director. It also won several other awards around the globe, making it the movie of 2008. Vikas's second novel, Six Suspects, was released on July 28, 2008, and is being translated into 30 languages. So apart from writing books, Vikas has also written for Time Magazine, Newsweek, The Guardian, The Telegraph in the UK, Outlook Magazine in India, and Liberation in France. And in the year 2010, the University of South Africa conferred an honorary degree of Doctor of Literature and Philosophy on Vikas at a graduation ceremony at Pretoria. So, over to you.
Thank you, Jessie. It's wonderful to be at Google, one of the most innovative companies in the world. Google is a huge part of my life, but it is your life. I think for all you Googlers, I think you can be very proud of the company that you are working in. It's also great to see young India at work. I'm told the average age, of the Googlers here is about to me it looked like 16, but I was told it's like 21. And it's really wonderful to see, India is known as a software nation, and it's great to see, all of you contributing to that journey. Well, I'm here to talk about my journey as a writer. And as Jessie has just introduced me, I wear 2 hats. I am a diplomat and a writer. I've been a diplomat now for 26 years and a writer only for the last, 9, 10. So that's why I call myself a diplomat who writes. And the very first question that people ask me is, how did you become a writer? Many people ask me, did you always want to be a writer? The short answer is no. I never imagined I could be a writer. I did read a lot in my school and college days, even wrote some short stories. But the last published short story of mine was called The Autobiography of a Donkey, and it was published in my school magazine way back in 1980. I joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1986, and for 15 years, the thought of writing fiction did not cross my mind. It was only when I was posted in London between 2000 and 2003 that I first thought of writing something. And there were 2 inspirations. One, of course, was the city of London itself, such a hub for the world of English language publishing. And the second was the fact that some of my contemporaries in the Foreign Service were trying their hand at fiction. In fact, now there are so many Indian Foreign Service officers who have started writing fiction that people have even started talking about an IFS school of writing. Anyway, I started this novel called Q&A in the summer of 2003. And believe it or not, I finished it in just 2 months. And there were 2 reasons why I was able to do that. The first, of course, was Google. If I had to research all the subjects which I did research for Q&A and go to the British Library, it would have taken me at least a year plus. I had to research so many things: Bedia tribal girls sold into prostitution, the Taj Mahal. I had to research betting on cricket matches. I had to even research Australian English. And all that research was made so much easier and faster by Google. At the click of a button, I was there. The second reason I was able to write it in 2 months was because my wife, Aparna, and my 2 sons had already gone back to India. I had 2 months left. They had already gone back to India. So sometimes, behind a successful man, there is an absent woman. It was only when I went to the Oscar ceremony in Hollywood that I discovered in Hollywood they do things differently. There the saying goes, behind every successful man there is a woman, and behind the woman is the wife. Anyway, I wrote this book in 2 months, and within 3 months of my finishing it, it found a publisher. And publishing, to my mind, remains central to the art of writing. You may be the best writer in the world, but unless your books get published, you will keep getting rejection slips like the one Samuel Johnson is believed to have given an aspiring writer when he told him, your book is both good and original. Unfortunately, the parts which are good are not original, and the parts which are original are not good. So can you imagine what happens to such a writer? There's the story about a very devout Christian writer who wrote 10 novels, none of which got published. He got so dejected, he actually hanged himself. So naturally, when his soul went up to the pearly gates, he was met by St. Peter, and St. Peter asked him, where do you want to go? Because he had not read any of his novels, so he could not decide whether to send him to heaven or to hell. And the writer is a clever fellow. He says, Google ads sometimes make out the reality to be much better than it actually is. So he says, I would like a tour of both facilities. So first, St. Peter takes him to hell. As they descend into the fiery pits, the writer sees row upon row of writers chained to their desks in a steaming sweatshop, writing longhand and thick registers. As they worked, they were repeatedly whipped with thorny lashes by demons. Oh my, said the writer, this doesn't look very good. Let's go to heaven. A few moments later, as they ascend into heaven, the writer sees row upon row of writers chained to their desks in a steaming sweatshop, writing longhand and thick registers. As they worked, they too were repeatedly whipped with thorny lashes by demons. Hey, said the writer, this is just as bad as hell. No, it is not, says St. Peter. Here, your work gets published. So Q&A was written in 2003, and it was published in 2005. It's the story of this 18-year-old waiter called Ram Muhammad Thomas, who participates in the biggest game show on earth. It's called W3B, Who Will Win a Billion? They are offering ₹1 billion as prize money. And he answers all their questions, and then he is subsequently arrested because nobody can believe that a waiter, 18-year-old waiter who has never gone to school can actually know all these answers. And then subsequently, Ram Muhammad Thomas narrates, the sequences of his life to his lawyer, and that's how, she comes to understand the genesis of all the answers that he knew. The original inspiration for this novel actually came from a project called Hole in the Wall. I'm sure many of you would have heard of this project. This was started by a group of computer scientists at NIIT in Delhi, and adjoining their campus was the Kalkaji slum. So they literally carved a hole in that common wall, and they put a freely accessible computer with a touchscreen and internet facing the slum. And 3 months later, they discovered that children living in that slum had started using that computer facility entirely on their own, without any teachers. These are slum kids, children who have not gone to school, who don't know a word of English. And they were accessing, I don't know, Google was there or not, but they were certainly accessing this mobile internet facility. So that revealed to me that perhaps there is some innate ability in all of us that, given the right opportunity, can surface. And I thought to myself, I said, if a slum kid can start accessing a computer, then a slum kid can also participate in a brain quiz and win. And that is how really Q&A was born. Once Q&A was finished and it got published, 1 year before the book was published, I received the offer from Film 4. They want to make a movie based on the book. And I was astounded because, as I told you, the book had not even been published. It's 1 year before publication. BBC asked me this question in an interview. Mr. Swarup, when you were writing this novel, could you visualize it as a film? And my answer was, I couldn't even visualize it as a book. First-time writer, what are the chances of getting published? So it was a great surprise to be approached by Film 4 that they wanted to make a film based on the book. Well, now as you all know, the film did come out. It was called Slumdog Millionaire. And it literally took the world by storm, winning so many awards, including 4 Golden Globes, 7 BAFTAs and a staggering 8 Oscars. And ever since then, people have been asking me this question: Mr. Swarup, how do you feel about the adaptation? And it's a ticklish question for me to answer. I mean, Q&A is my book, but Slumdog Millionaire is not my film. It is Danny Boyle's film. And even as I was thinking how to approach this question, I came across a brilliant parallel in India. Bengali writer Mani Shankar Mukherjee's book was adapted into a film by Satyajit Ray. And Shankar was asked exactly the same question. Your book is now a film. What do you think about it? And he thought about it, and then he said, you know, giving permission for your book to be made into a film is a bit like giving your daughter away in marriage. The first thing that happens is your daughter acquires a new surname. So Q&A gets remarketed as Slumdog Millionaire. The second thing that happens is that you are saddled with a son-in-law, namely the film. And then he said, remember, in India, you never ever speak ill of your son-in-law in public. So you will not hear me complain, you know, how the film is different from my book. You will not hear me carp how a slum kid, you know, in the film can, you know, start accessing Google and speak in English. Fact of the matter is, Slumdog Millionaire works as a film. And I think it's to Danny Boyle's great credit that he was able to put together the package so brilliantly. You know, wonderful acting by the child actors, soulful music by A.R. Rahman, and absolutely mesmerizing cinematography by Anthony Dodd Mantle. Otherwise, how many 10 Oscar-nominated films can you remember in which not a single actor or actress was nominated for an acting award? So that's what Slumdog Millionaire was. It was the right film for the right time. Once your first book becomes such a huge success, there is always pressure on the second book, you know, the dreaded second book syndrome. And I thought to myself, I said, what should be my second book all about? My publishers dropped some hints. Perhaps you might like to continue with the same characters that you created in Q&A. Maybe we could call it another Q&A and, you know, trace the life story of Ram Muhammad Thomas from the age of 18 till the age of 25. I thought about it, but then I said, you know, if that is the only story I have to tell, then, you know, that's not what I want to be. Because the primary question I asked myself is, what did you do in Q&A? And I said, I told a story. So I asked myself, do you have other stories to tell, or is that the only story you can tell? And as it happened, at that particular point in time, I was sort of grappling with 6 different stories. So I created a novel called 6 Suspects. Now that is also inspired by, you know, everyday life in India. In that novel, I had a playboy called Vivek Rai. You know, his nickname is Vicky Rai. Vicky Rai is a 32-year-old playboy. He's the son of a home minister. When he was 17 years old, his father gifted him a BMW. He took it out for a spin, and while coming back at night, mowed down 6 homeless people who were sleeping on the pavement. Rings a bell? The case comes to trial. None of the witnesses remember seeing a BMW, and naturally he's acquitted. When he is 20 years old, he goes to a wildlife sanctuary in Rajasthan and shoots dead 2 black bucks. Rings another bell. Again, case comes to trial. But within 6 months, the only eyewitness who had seen him shoot the black bucks, the forest ranger, dies mysteriously. Again, case closed. He's acquitted. When he's 25 years old, he decides to hold his birthday party at a very trendy pub on the Delhi-Jaipur highway called Mango. At 2 a.m., he staggers to the bar and asks for a drink from the bartender. The bartender is a young woman, is a postdoctoral student at Delhi University. She says, I'm sorry, sir, the bar is now closed. I can't give you a drink. He gets so enraged, he takes out his revolver and pumps 2 bullets into her. She dies on the spot. Again, Vicky Rai is arrested. Case drags on for 7 years. During those 7 years, many things happen. 6 eyewitnesses who had seen him pull the trigger withdraw their testimony and say, sorry, we did this under police pressure. The murder weapon disappears from the police lockup. The police ballistics report says that the 2 bullets were fired from 2 different guns. So naturally, Vicky Rai is acquitted once again. To celebrate this acquittal, he holds a massive party at his farmhouse in Mehrauli. You know, 300, 400 guests are there. Imported liquor is flowing. A live band is belting out the latest hits. People are enjoying themselves. At midnight, suddenly, the lights go off and a shot rings out. Within 10 seconds, the lights come back on again, and then everybody discovers that somebody has shot dead Vicky Rai. Since he is the son of the home minister, The police are already on traffic control duty outside the farmhouse. They immediately seal the premises. They don't allow anyone to leave. And they search all the guests. And in that search, 6 people are discovered with guns. So remember, if you go to a party with a gun and the host gets shot, you become a suspect. So the rest of the novel, what I told you, happens in the first 15 pages of the novel. The rest of the novel is really the backstories of these 6 suspects. Who are these people? What were they doing in the farmhouse that night? Why did they have a gun? Which one of them is the murderer? So that is the story of 6 suspects. And just, 5 days ago, I have released my new book. It's called The Accidental Apprentice. Now, this is a book that I think many of you would be able to relate to, because partly it's about the world of business. It's about a very simple, ordinary sales girl called Sapna Sinha. She's 23 years old, so I'm sure those of you in this room would be able to relate to her very easily. Now, Sapna could be any young woman in Delhi who travels every day by metro, struggles to make ends meet, and dreams of a better life. As she herself acknowledges, she's stuck in a dead-end job with a future on permanent hold. There was a time, not so long ago, when the ship of my life had direction and momentum. Now it seems like an aimless, rudderless drift, where one week leads to another, each day is the same, and nothing ever changes. Well, everything changes in an instant for Sapna when one afternoon she's accosted by an elderly and eccentric billionaire called Vinay Mohan Acharya, who offers her the post of CEO, Chief Executive Officer of its $10 billion company. Now, naturally, Sapna refuses to believe this. I mean, after all, she doesn't know this man. She's never been to a management institute. How could someone just pick her out to be a CEO? And I'll just read out a little portion from the novel, just to give you a little flavor of how things unfold. So now Sapna and Vinay Mohan Acharya, they have crossed over from the temple and they are sitting in, a coffee house. And Vinay Mohan Acharya asks her, if you don't mind telling me, how much do you earn in a month? With my sales commission, around 18,000 rupees. That's all? Then shouldn't you be jumping at the chance to lead a multi-million-dollar company and acquire a fortune? Look, Mr. Acharya, I'm still quite confused about your offer. I mean, first of all, why do you need a CEO? Why? Because I'm 68 years old and not getting any younger. God made the human body like a machine with built-in obsolescence. I'm about to reach my expiry date. But before I go, I want to ensure an orderly succession at the organization I have nurtured for 40 years. I want to ensure that I'm followed by someone who believes in the same values that I do. But why me? Why not your own son or daughter? Well, for one, I don't have a family anymore. My wife and daughter died in a plane crash 18 years ago. Oh, then what about someone from your company? I have searched far and wide within the company. I couldn't find anyone remotely suitable. My executives are good implementers, excellent subordinates, but I don't see the traits of a great leader in any of them. And what do you see in me? I don't know a thing about running a business. I'm not even an MBA. These degrees are simply a piece of paper. They don't teach you how to lead people, only how to manage stuff. That's why I didn't go to a management institute to pick my CEO. I came to a temple. You have still not answered my question. Why me? There was something in your eyes, a sparkle that I had never seen anywhere before. He searches my eyes for confirmation before glancing away. I have always been an observer of people, he continues, looking around the hall at the middle-class shoppers and office workers sitting on the other tables. And of all the people I observed in the temple, you seemed the most focused. Call it intuition, psychic sense, whatever you want, but something told me that you could be the one. You alone had the compelling mix of determination and desperation that I was looking for. I thought desperation was a negative virtue. He shakes his head. Happy people don't make good CEOs. Contentment breeds laziness. It is aspiration that drives achievement. I want people with hunger. Hunger that is born in the desert of dissatisfaction. You seem to have that want, that hunger. I am getting caught up in his sweeping statements and grand assumptions. But the logic behind his rhetoric still eludes me. Do you always take decisions based on whims? Never underestimate the power of intuition. 11 years ago, I brought a troubled factory in Romania called Iancu Steel. It was losing money every day. All my experts advised me against the purchase. They said I was throwing good money after bad. But I remained firm in my decision. I was attracted to the factory only because of its name. Iancu means God is gracious. Today, 53% of our steel revenues come from that factory in Romania. God is indeed gracious. So you do believe in God. Isn't this proof enough? He points at the vermilion mark on his forehead. The main reason I came to a temple to select my successor is because I wanted a devout like me. We are living in Kali Yuga, the dark age, full of sin and corruption. Religion is no longer in fashion. The youngsters working for me are consumed by consumption. They have probably not visited a temple to pray in years. I'm not saying they are all atheists, but their God is money, first and foremost. But you, he nods at me approvingly, you seem to be just the pious, God-fearing candidate I was looking for. Okay, I get it. You act on whims and your latest whim tells you that I am the chosen one. Now tell me, what's the catch? There is no catch, but there are some terms and conditions. You will have to pass a few tests. Tests? Don't worry, I'm not taking you back to school. A school simply tests your memory, but life tests your character. My 7 tests are rites of passage designed to gauge your mettle and potential as a CEO. Why 7? In my 40 years of running a business, I have learned one thing. A company is only as good as the person who runs it. And I have whittled down the traits of a successful CEO to 7 basic attributes. So each of the 7 tests will focus on one of those 7 traits. And what exactly will I have to do to pass those tests? Nothing that you won't do in your daily life. I will not ask you to steal or kill or do anything illegal. In fact, you won't even be aware of the tests. What do you mean? My tests will come from the textbook of life. Doesn't life test us every day? Don't we make choices every day? I will simply evaluate your choices, your responses to life's daily challenges. That will reveal the stuff you are made of. And what if I fail any of those tests? Well, then I will have to look for someone else. But my gut instinct tells me you won't fail. It almost seems destined. The biggest lottery ticket of all time will be yours. In that case, my decision is quite clear. I'm not interested in your offer. He seems astounded. But why? I don't believe in lottery tickets. But you believe in God. And sometimes God gives you much more than you ask for. I'm not that greedy, I say, rising from the table. Thank you, Mr. Acharya. It was nice meeting you, but I really must get back to the showroom now. Sit, he orders me. There is steel in his voice. I swallow hard and sit down like an obedient student. Listen, Sapna, his voice softens. There are only 2 types of people in the world, winners and losers. I am giving you the chance to be a winner. All I ask in return is for you to sign this consent form. He gestures to Rana, that's his aide, who produces a printed sheet of paper from the inside pockets of his tracksuit and lays it in front of me. Since Alka's death, now Alka was Sapna's younger sister who committed suicide. Since Alka's death, I have developed a sixth sense about some things. A little warning bell that goes off in my head whenever a situation is not quite right. That bell is ringing as I pick up the form. It is short, just 5 sentences. 1. The signer hereby agrees to be considered for the post of CEO of the ABC Group of companies. 2. The signer hereby permits the ABC Group to perform necessary checks and procedures to assess the signer's suitability for the job. 3. The signer is not permitted to terminate the agreement midway while the necessary checks and procedures are still being conducted. 4. The signer agrees to maintain complete confidentiality of this agreement by not discussing it with any third party. 5. In consideration of the above, the signer has received a non-refundable advance of rupees 1 lakh. This only talks of 1 lakh rupees, I observe. Didn't I hear you mention the figure of $10 billion? The 1 lakh is simply to participate in the tests. If you fail, you get to keep the money. And if you pass, you get the job. I assure you, the CEO's salary will have many more zeros. By now, the warning bell is clanging like a fire alarm. I know that this is a swindle and that Acharya has tried this ploy before. Tell me, how many people have you got to sign this form so far? You are candidate number 7, Acharya exhales. But I know in my heart that you will be the last one. My quest is over. So is my time. I stand up decisively. I have no intention of signing this form or participating in any tests. Rana responds by laying a stack of 1,000-rupee notes on the table. They look crisp and new, straight from a bank. He is baiting me, but I am not tempted. You think you can buy me with your money? Well, this is a negotiation after all, Acharya insists. Remember, in business as in life, You never get what you deserve. You only get what you negotiate. I don't negotiate with people I hardly know. What if this is some kind of trap? The only trap is that of low expectations. Look, I understand your reservations, Acharya says soothingly, leaning forward on his elbows. But you need to take a less bleak view of human nature, Sapna. I sincerely and genuinely want to make you my CEO. Do you have any idea how ridiculous this conversation sounds? Such things happen only in movies and books, not in real life. Well, I am real, and you are real, and my offer is real. A man like me does not waste time in tomfoolery. I'm sure you can find other candidates who would be more than willing to accept your offer. I am not interested. You are making a big mistake, Acharya wags a finger at me. Perhaps the greatest mistake of your life. But I will not pressurize you. Take my card, and if you change your mind within the next 48 hours, call me. The offer will still be valid. He pushes a business card across the table, Rana watching me like a hawk. I take it, smile tightly at them, and then, without as much as a backward glance, head for the door. My mind is spinning faster than a CD as I hurry towards B block. The overwhelming feeling I have is one of relief, as though I had escaped from some grave danger by the skin of my teeth. I look over my shoulder periodically to make sure the duo are not following me. The more I reflect on what has just transpired, the more convinced I am that Acharya is either a devious shark or a raving lunatic, and I want no truck with either category. I breathe easy only once I return to the safety of the showroom, to my air-conditioned world of plasma TVs, frost-free refrigerators, and fuzzy logic washing machines. So this is, this excerpt that I read out is from the opening of the novel, how Acharya meets Sapna Sinha and makes her the offer. She refuses him at first, as you just heard, but circumstances force her to accept the offer because she's in need of at least a couple of lakh rupees. And the rest of the novel is really about how these 7 tests unfold. It is a journey that takes Sapna from her swanky showroom in Connaught Place to a village in Haryana, a singing competition in Mumbai. Along the way, she meets a vain Bollywood superstar, a crooked kidney specialist, a dangerous mafia don, and even a kleptomaniac Gandhian. So on the surface, this novel may seem like it's about finding what it takes to be a successful CEO, but at core, it's really about finding yourself, knowing what you want in life, who you want to be, what is your ultimate dream, and how to fulfill those dreams. That's what this novel is all about. And I do hope that young India would be able to connect with this novel because, my novels are really a snapshot of India at that particular point in time. I am inspired always by what's happening around me, the everyday stories that we read about in the newspapers. And right now, we find that women's issues are taking center stage. So when I started writing this novel, of course, that was not the case, but it's just, fortuitous that now that my book has come out and, it has a very strong-willed heroine called Sapna Sinha at a time when all of us are grappling with women's issues. So this was a little peek into my so-called writer's life. I have created these 3 books only in the last 9 years. These are the only 3 books I have written. But I do not, really see myself as a full-time writer. I do not see myself as a professional writer. For me, writing is really an outlet for my creative passion. And I call myself a weekend writer because, Monday to Friday, I'm so busy and caught up in my day job that I cannot write. I cannot have time to write. And secondly, when I want to write, I need what I call a clear horizon. That is at least 6 to 7 hours of uninterrupted work where nobody disturbs me, my cell phone does not ring, I can concentrate and then write from that perspective. And that really only happens on a weekend. But I can't complain because the important thing for me is that I am able to write what I want to write. The security of my day job actually frees me up to write in my spare time. I'm not dependent on writing for my bread and butter, so I can create what I would like to create, not what the market wants me to create. And I think there is something to be said for this kind of a life as well. Finally, I think what I would like to say is that many people tend to believe that creative ability is something that is unique to a few people. That God allots that capability only to a select group of people who can become writers or artists or musicians or actors, and that the rest of the world, they just don't have that creative spark. And that is something I strongly contest. And I think all of you sitting in this room are emblematic of the fact that everybody has that spark. Especially now that we are living in a 21st century world, which is hyper-connected, where all of us have the tools at our disposal, where we can all become, creators as we were once simply consumers or downloaders. Now, a poor man with an internet-enabled cell phone has as much knowledge at his disposal as 15 years ago a rich man with 10,000 books in his library. And the kind of project that Google is engaged in, digitizing all the works of mankind, which will be available to all the people all the time, really, I think is the way forward, enabling the creative genius in all of us to get unleashed. All I believe is that you need three things to really, unleash that creative genius inside you: curiosity, confidence, and a computer. Curiosity is very important because only when you are curious about the world will you try to explore it. Every novel, every fiction starts with that simple question: what if? What if a slum kid participated in a brain quiz? What if there was a planet called Pandora and there were people called Navi living there? So every work of fiction starts with that question, what if? And that what if will start only if you are curious about that world and want to imagine a different future. Confidence is also very important because writing is about taking risks. You have an idea in your head. You don't know if that idea will appeal to other people as well. Everyone has their grandmother's story inside their heads. Sometimes that should remain inside the head. I'm not saying that. But if you believe, if you are confident that that story has some universal elements which will appeal to people outside your immediate family, then by all means, go ahead and test it out. Testing is very important. And finally, you need the computer for the research. I thanked Google in my first book because it made research so much faster. And in my second book, 6 Suspects, I actually had a character called Larry Page. Now, Larry Page in 6 Suspects is a forklift operator at the Walmart store in Waco. But he comes to India and he's mistaken to be Larry Page, the founder of Google. And he goes through some really hilarious adventures. So I think on that note, since I started with Google, let me end with Google and say that it's been a huge pleasure to interact with you all, to have this opportunity of speaking to a bunch of the smartest minds in India. And I do hope that you will engage with the world of reading and with books, because we all know that book reading is becoming a declining habit. These days, books have to compete with so many other things, with VH1, X Factor 2, PS3, and Spider-Man 4. So thank you very much, and now I'm open to questions.
I guess while everyone gathers their thoughts, maybe I can start.
Yes.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Neeta, and it's a very, very great day for me to have you here and to listen to you. I wish I could take notes. What I wanted to ask you is, what are your tricks or tips to get a book published? All of us here would love to write, and I know several of our Googlers are very passionate about blogging as well.
Yes.
But it's not always to get a book published and get it, audience with the world. What did you do different?
No, Somerset Maugham is believed to have said, there are 3 rules for writing the novel. Unfortunately, no one knows what they are. So that's the problem with the writing, that you just do not know whether it will work or it will not work, because sometimes luck plays a huge role. I mean, J.K. Rowling, we all know, was rejected by 13 publishing houses, and today her books have sold over 400 million copies. She's worth over $1 billion. So I think luck is also important, but of course, the effort is very important. In my opinion, the most important thing is that the product that you have must be objectively good. Many first-time writers believe that they have written the greatest thing possible, deserving of the next Booker Prize or the next Pulitzer Prize. But very often that's not the case. And that's why testing becomes very important. Only when you have tested out that, the work that you have written, through the peer group, the friend circle, your teachers, people who can give you objective advice. If you show it to your mother, she of course will say, oh, fantastic, this is the greatest thing possible, go ahead. But only when you show it to people who are not inclined to, just boost your ego and who can give you honest advice, then only you will know the worth of what you have created. And if that feedback tells you that what you have created is worthy, then by all means go ahead. Because see, the great advantage of this 21st century, Google world is that we have cut out the middleman. If a publisher does not accept you, you can go straight to Kindle. Nobody's stopping you. That's the great advantage that you have now, that you are no longer dependent on the approval of a gatekeeper in order to cross over to the world of publishing. You can either self-publish or, as I said, go online. I mean, look at Justin Bieber. He posted his videos on YouTube, was discovered, and today he's a multi-millionaire. So that's what I'm saying, that now in the 21st century world that we live in, this hyper-connected world, we have the tools available at our disposal that allow our creativity to flourish, and there are no limits to what we can create.
So, in your whole journey of writing a book, how much of material do you throw away saying, no, it doesn't really fit the book? And how much material do you go back to saying, actually, that actually fitted the book, going back to that?
You wouldn't believe it, but Q&A, what has been published is my first draft. And not a single paragraph has been rewritten. It's been edited, very competently edited, but normally first-time writers, 60 to 70% you have to rewrite because it doesn't work. But I just got very lucky that my publisher, my agent, my editor, everybody agreed with my vision and didn't want anything to be cut out or changed. So it has been edited, but it has not been rewritten. At the same time, I have gone down other roads, in writing for my other books, where, I did 30, 40,000 words and then suddenly decided, no, it's not making sense to me anymore, or I'm no longer as enthusiastic about it as I was when I first started writing it. And then you give it up and you start something else. So that is the hardest thing to do, deciding what you want to do next. Because if you take a wrong turn, then you can spend 6, 7, 8 months of your life and then realize you have come up against a blind alley and you have to come back again. But nothing is eventually ever wasted completely. What you wrote, even that, I take it that at least you learn something about the craft of writing in visualizing that or in creating that. And who knows, later on you might cannibalize something from that and use it somewhere else. So nothing is completely wasted, but at the same time, it's important for you to have that much of confidence in your work that you have reached the point of no return. I think every writer, when he or she starts writing, there comes a point when you will finish this. But before that point, there is always a process of self-doubt. Will this work? Is this good? Is this not good? Because writing is also an incredibly lonely process. It's a very self-isolating process. You lock yourself in your room and you create an invented world in your head. And you are your only touchstone, So that's why I'm saying, if you can have a peer group which can evaluate and critique your work, then it makes writing that much more easier.
Can we expect to see a movie on the 6 aspects or now even the Accidental Apprentice actually?
Yes, 6 Suspects has already been optioned for a film by BBC and Starfield Productions. The script has been written by John Hodge, who wrote the script for Trainspotting, Shallow Grave, The Beach. And they have just appointed Pablo Tropero, an Argentinian director, to helm the project. So right now, I believe Tropero is working with the script, and if they get a shooting script ready, then hopefully either this year or early next year, shooting should start. And Accidental Apprentice has just been released, but a director friend of mine has just, on my Gmail, I just discovered a message from him saying that I'll be very much interested.
I had a question, just a curious question in terms of how you would monetize what you write. Once you're in your second book, your third book, you've already built up a brand, so and you have an agent and it's easier to negotiate. But the very first time you actually write something, how do you know, once a publisher says, yes, this is a good work, I'd like to publish it, how do you know if you're getting what it's worth?
Yeah, no, that's a very, very important question. How do you monetize? Because it's the same question that an artist would have to, a first-time artist, he paints a canvas, what price does he charge? So there, I think various factors, operate. I had an agent, and he was able to send the manuscript to 8 or 10 different publishers. And then depending on the feedback from the publishers, I think there is an instinctive feel to a book, the moment it lands at a publisher's place. They think of it either as a small book or a medium book or a big book, and the size of the advance is commensurate with the placing of their book. And if they feel that it's a big book, then sometimes you go into an auction situation where 2 publishers are competing with each other in order to get the rights. But for me, to be very honest, the important thing was not the monetary factor, that how much will I get for it. Important thing was, how much will the publisher invest in terms of promoting the book, in terms of publicizing the book. Because these days, the old saying, any fool can write a book. It takes a genius to sell one. Yes.
Hi Vikas. Are you getting two questions at once? I'm from the Bombay office. What I wanted to know is when you start writing a book, do you always envision the ending? Do you know where you want to get to? And in that way, do you sort of walk your way towards that ending, or do you plan it out very carefully and have roadmaps towards it?
Yep, I always start with the ending. You know, now I have perfected my formula for writing the kind of books I write, which I call social thrillers. It's the hook, line, and sinker. So first is you have to have a hook that can entice the reader in. So in the first book, the hook was, how does he answer those questions? The 12 or 13 questions that he's asked. In the second book, it was the 6 suspects. Which one of them is the murderer? And in the current book, it's the 7 tests. Will Sapna pass those 7 tests? Will she fail? Are the 7 tests for real? Are they not for real? So that's the first thing. Create a hook which can entice the reader into the book. The second is the line. Have a dramatic narrative, a narrative in which there are lots of twists and turns, things keep on happening to keep the reader engaged. And sinker in the sense that, emotional attachment to the character. If that character sings, your heart sings, that kind of a thing. So that is how I like to frame my books. But for me, the ending comes first because I want to give a surprise at the end to the reader. And for that, you have to work backwards from the ending and then sort of, put in the other milestones in place. Yes.
Hi. First of all, I wanted to confess, being a big quizzer myself, I really enjoyed Q&A. And that actually inspired me to keep on quizzing, so
right.
I just wanted to give that to you. My question is, you obviously travel a lot, and I'm sure there are some instances where come across some situations where I say, this would probably make like an interesting situation in my book. So has your travels kind of inspired you to write something, and are you planning on writing some non-fiction also? I mean, you've stuck to fiction. Any plans of writing non-fiction?
Yeah. Look, I mean, no writer writes in a vacuum. Even though I write about India, but I write about India living in South Africa or Japan, where I'm currently residing. The fact that you are living there means that you are having some experiences there. You are meeting people, you are having conversations. And subconsciously, some of those experiences, some of those conversations filter into your writing, even though it may not be immediately obvious. So certainly, the fact that I'm living in Japan and that I'm interacting with people there has had an impact on my writing. But I still feel most connected with India. And even though I live, thousands of kilometers away from India, because of, 21st century technology, I can watch events happening in India in real time, sitting in Japan, as you would sitting here. So I do not feel that, I am at a remove from India. In fact, sometimes distance gives you a better perspective also. So that is there. But having said that, I still want to create works based on my invented landscape and invented characters. The diplomatic trivia of my day job could be of great interest, but I feel that what I create in my books, murder and mayhem and all kinds of things happening, would still be of greater interest. So as of now, I would like to stick to fiction. And what I love about fiction is that there are no boundaries. A fiction writer creates a world in which he frames the rules. The laws of physics don't operate. The laws of the writer operate. And that's the great thing, I like about fiction.
I have a connected question.
Yes.
Have you ever encountered what they call as the writer's block, and you don't know how to move forward, and how would you face it?
Yeah. I don't have writer's block, but I have had writer's cramp. My right hand starts cramping if I hold a pen for very long. Surprisingly, the only time it works brilliantly is when I'm signing books. Then. But otherwise, I've had banks returning my checks saying, this signature does not match the one which we have on record and things like that. No, I've been a lucky writer in the sense that I've never had writer's block, or at least I've never had writer's block for an extended period of time. Certainly, sometimes you sit behind, in front of the computer screen and you wonder how are you going to fill that screen, with words, and nothing is happening. But those occasions are very rare. Normally, my mind is bubbling with too many ideas, and I have to decide which ones to choose and which ones to ignore. I think that is important. At the same time, writing is a difficult process. Dorothy Parker was once asked, do you love writing? And she gave a classic reply. She said, I hate writing. I love having written. So, when you write, actually, it's tough work, but only afterwards, when you read what you have written and then you enjoy that, then you have a sense of satisfaction.
Quick question is, any author you consider as your role model during this process, and one of the most favorite books which you've read till date?
No, I have read many authors. I had the big advantage, unlike all of you here, of growing up in an era where there was no internet, there was no cable television, there was no television even, forget cable television. So the only pastime I had was reading books. And I read each and every book that I could lay my hands upon. You know, whether it was Franz Kafka, Albert Camus, Alistair MacLean, Agatha Christie, Earl Stanley Gardner, you name it. Any and every book that I could lay my hands upon, I read. And I think it was that reading which I did, you know, so many, if I wrote this book in 2 months, it's because of the 25 years of reading I did prior to writing. So all those writers, I think, shaped me as a writer, in the sense they allowed me to discriminate between what is good writing and what is bad writing. But having said that, you know, you cannot really adopt the writing style of any other writer. You have to find your own voice, you have to find your own style, you have to find your own idiom. And that's what I tried to do in Q&A, you know, find the voice of Ram Mohammed Thomas. And once I had those words, I have been arrested for winning a quiz show. I knew I had the voice of Ram Mohammed Thomas. Among the current crop of writers, I greatly admire J.M. Coetzee, the South African writer. I thought Disgrace was an absolute classic. I also like Paul Auster, I like Haruki Murakami. So these are some of the writers, you know, whose writing style I like, but some of them don't believe in resolution at all. You know, for me, resolution is very important. If a reader has invested time and money in my book, then I don't want the reader to go puzzling into the night. What happened? Did he die? You know, did he get the money? You know, did they get married? What happened, you know? For me, resolution is important. Yes. Yes, I think...
So now that 2 of your books are actually been adapted to films, like how challenging is it to not think, say you're writing for a film? Because, I mean, there's always this pressure that probably my book might be adapted to a film, so...
No, I never write from that perspective, because look, if that is what you're looking for, then write screenplays, because that is the correct medium for that. Six Suspects, my second book, you know, when I was writing Six Suspects, Q&A was already being made into a film. That was pretty much, it had not been released yet, but it was being made into a film. Yet I wrote Six Suspects, which is a murder mystery. Now, you know, a whodunit is the most difficult book to film. You know, in a book, how do you disguise a murderer? Because I never had an eye that, you know, this book will also become a film one day or something like that. So when I write a book, I write a book. And I have no expectations that this will be made into a film. But many people tell me that, you know, I write very visually, in the sense that, you know, when I create my book, then I myself am imagining that scene in my head, and then I write from that perspective. So that probably makes it easier for it to be translated into, you know, into another medium.
I have a question. So how much say does a writer or author have when his work is being adapted into a movie? Say or control? Yes.
That depends on what kind of contract you have. You know, there is the British contract, there is the Hollywood contract. The kind of contract I had me in charge of creative control. You know, I had creative control in the sense that I would have to sign off on the screenplay. So they would show me the screenplay, you know, accept my suggestions if I had any, and then on that basis proceed further, which I think is the right way to go. After all, no one is closer to the work than the writer. So any you know, film people who want to completely ignore the writer or cut out the writer from that process, you know, I think is not doing the right thing. Because yes, there are some writers who are so obsessed about or so obsessive about their work that, you know, they can become too interfering. I was on a panel with a Chinese writer in Shanghai, and he had a very interesting take on this adaptation business. He said the best attitude you can have towards the adaptation of your work is that of a distant relative. You know, and he says that's very effective, because if the film does well, you can always claim the relative, oh, he's my relative. And if it doesn't do well, you can say, I had nothing to do with it.
I have one more.
Yes.
When you were speaking, I was a little amazed with, you have a day job, and then you said you dedicate weekends to your passion,
Yes.
which is writing.
Yes.
What happens to the family? Because the discussions we have here, a lot of times are around work-life balance and, oh, I don't have the time to pursue my passion, which may be driving, stitching, whatever it is. How do you organize your time?
No, it's very, very important, and I'm incredibly lucky to have such a supportive family who give me the space on weekends. Because, you know, if Monday to Friday I'm working at the office, and Saturday and Sunday I'm doing my wife's grocery list and my son's homework, then there'll be no time to create at all. So it's not that I work every weekend. There are some weekends where I goof off, or we go with the family to an outing or travel, or catch a movie or something like that. But when the idea is fully formed in my head and I have started writing, then my family respects that, okay, he has reached that particular point where we need to give him space. Otherwise he'll be a cranky old man. And then they allow me that space and allow me to work. And without that, I think without having a supportive family, the creative process just does not work.
Also a passion for your art. That you want to pursue it.
No, so that's what I'm saying. You have to have that passion, because if you don't have that passion, the creative juices just won't flow. But for the passion to be translated into a product, you have to have that supportive family environment, which allows, that creative process to unfold. Yeah.
One of the common themes in Q&A and also as you spoke about Accidental Apprentice is the process of evaluating someone or judging someone based on, it could be a quiz based on his memory, or it could be something totally different. So was there any instant that you actually relate to, or has there been a real life experience where you've seen people being evaluated in a certain way? I mean, nowadays with access to all the information, you need not be the person who has everything in your mind. You have to know what to make of it and how to get that. So do you have any anecdotal experience of
this evaluation that you are saying, it does not just happen in the workplace. We evaluate people all the time. In fact, the whole motivation behind writing Q&A was, we have this tendency, especially in India, that those of us who have the good fortune of, getting a decent education, going to school, universities, reading, newspapers, we believe we know everything. And those who have not had this good fortune, people who work for us, for instance, who have not gone to a formal education system, we feel they don't know anything. And we tend to put them down. Tumhe to kuch nahi aata, you don't know anything. And I have always been tremendously impressed by the amount of wisdom and knowledge these common folk possess, who we don't give the time of day. So the whole purpose behind writing Q&A was to show that the best teacher in the world is life itself. And those who graduate from the school of hard knocks know that every moment in life is meaningful and precious and significant. There are no unnecessary experiences. And that's what happens in the book. Ram Muhammad Thomas has street knowledge as opposed to book knowledge. And it is that street knowledge that enables him to unlock the questions, unlock the keys to the questions, not only onto the quiz show, but to life itself.
Do you think art is just worth it and good enough for art's sake, or should it have a greater purpose and a social responsibility?
Well, that again depends from writer to writer. There are some writers who only seek to amuse and entertain, and there are some writers who want to bring about social change and change the world. So both kinds of writers, I think, have a place in the world. And I think both kinds of stories can lead to the discovery of truth. The important thing is that it's a personal truth. It is truth as seen or perceived by the writer. Because remember, a novel is not a reproduction of reality. It is a recreation. And when you recreate that reality, you do so through the prism of your own experiences. So, as I said, the kind of books I write, I do not set out to be, a game changer or whatever. But at the same time, I say my books may not have a message, but they have a conscience. That, after you have read the book, some issues, if they are still lingering in your mind about, some of the issues that I have highlighted or touched upon in my books, then I find that to be a bonus. But primarily, I want you to get engrossed in my book and enjoy the ride.